All right. Well, welcome back to Always on the Hunt. This week we have another special guest, and I'm really excited to have Vince Schuster on, Senior Vice President of Sales at Neoti. He's a well-known figure in the AV industry with a career that spans both major and emerging brands and a deep commitment to the industry leadership through Avixa. Vince brings a unique perspective on growth, teamwork, and the future of Pro AV. With that being said, Vince, welcome to Always on the Hunt.
Thank you, Leo. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, it was great seeing you a couple weeks ago at InfoComm. How was InfoComm for you?
InfoComm for me this year literally was the best one that I've attended, mostly on being an exhibitor, as well as other things that revolve around what was called InfoComm and now Avixa, as you mentioned.
Right.
The attendance was fantastic in regards to a good mix. Avixa's done a really good job with that. Being a company that is not as large as maybe some of the biggest companies out there, we were overwhelmed with people coming, and Great. It was what we used to call tire kickers. And there was not really any tire kickers, at least for the first maybe 2.5 days of the show floor. So we were really excited about that. And just generally speaking, the excitement is more so that there's a mix that's been asked for some time. And that was really to have more end users and consultants, people that are specifying the products. Of course, the SIs, the system integrators, are very important at the end of the day as well. Sure. And sometimes the design build system integrators also spending more time with us and other vendors throughout the event, I think was very helpful for Avixa, and it's getting it much more excited for more people to come back next year, 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a great expo. I had a great time. Walked probably 6-7 miles every day. It was very sore afterwards, but had definitely, it was probably smaller than the year before, but I think like the quality was better than the quantity, right? And that's what we always strive for, is quality over quantity. What stood out? Did you get a chance to walk the floor at all? Did you get to see anything, or were you just slammed the whole time?
Well, Leo, that's a great question. I know that we had time together, which was good, but the perimeter of my booth, meaning the floorway or the walkway, I never went past that.
Right.
And this is the first time in well over 25 years of doing this, I think it is, that there just was no time to really walk the floor.
Good.
There was no time to go to the concessions. So it was about having some power bars, some coffee, and water. Yeah. So that's how good it was, in a negative sense of not being able to take a break like that. But no, I didn't. But I did see a lot of the videos, was able to communicate with colleagues in the industry during there. With some people stopped by. And overall, everybody was saying the same thing. It was a really good InfoComm. Many of them did say it was their best so far.
Good.
And like me, I'm a veteran going to that, and probably yourself too.
Right. No, this is my nearly 25th. So, been there, done that. But, what I like about going to InfoComm is it always gives you kind of, a feel for the industry, feel for the sentiment, feel for the, because obviously this year I think it's been a tough year for most, with the tariffs and so forth. What are your thoughts? How's the year? Yeah. How's the year been? What are your thoughts moving forward? What's your outlook?
Yeah, I would like to say it this way. It's probably my outlook, but just my family, I would call it, of the community. So that's a lot of it's the manufacturer side, and we probably could get into that at some later time. But essentially, you're right in most cases that there's a large percentage of the manufacturer side of it, and that's whose products are eventually going into the installations. It has been a tough year, not as bad as pandemic, but It's been pretty tough for most companies.
Pretty close.
And we're starting to see a change in that for Q3 and maybe Q4 this year. And you mentioned tariffs and different types of political things that are happening that started up before the election, kind of has slowed down, not just AV, but the IT side of the business as well, which are one and the same for us here in the AV business. So I think that we're starting to see I'm not going to call it a resurgence, but I definitely getting back to the norm that you would normally see in regards to turnover of the equipment And oftentimes it's either new builds or replacements that are happening, and we're
Right.
seeing more of that.
Yeah.
And we did hear about this during meetings with customers and people that were coming to the booth.
Good. I think a lot of people after the last 5 years of COVID and then work from home and then elections and wars and tariffs, like normalization would be really nice. I think a lot of people would take normal, over a resurgence.
Yeah, and one of the things that reflects upon your business and your staff's business really is there's a turnaround that's been not just because of InfoComm, but it is turning around where the hiring's starting back again.
Yeah,
which I think is good and healthy for the business.
Right. No, for sure. You could see the uptick and I walked out of there with a lot of promising leads, which is good for my business, but it's even better for the industry because that means people, companies are going like, yeah, it's time to start hiring again and investing again and growing again, and that's ultimately good for everyone. Let's talk about Avixa. So Avixa is a big part of your career, right? Besides your professional day job, you tend to spend a lot of time helping the organization and kind of giving back to the industry. Talk about that. Tell the listeners a little bit about your experiences there.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think it all started from my grassroots in terms of being in the industry, and from my side of it, I always had mentors, and a lot of these are the people that you see that have been legends in the AV.
Right.
Just people that brought me in, and so part of it was that's a great thing to have that happen as a newcomer into the industry, but more importantly, they were past presidents of InfoComm, most of them. So they always wanted me to get involved, and it was something that was always something that I always wanted to do. And you said that before, volunteering. So I've been on different councils, different committees, and probably the most important one is that I was the chairman, we call it of the Global Manufacturers Council during those bad times of COVID and the pandemic. So yeah, it was a really important opportunity for both Avixa and the manufacturers to communicate through all these times, because it's not just that manufacturers are so critical to them, but they are, the manufacturers are very vital to the business in regards to the overall experience that Avixa is trying to convey and be able to execute, even though they don't sell or build anything, relatively speaking, but they support along the way.
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so what happens in these committees? Like manufacturers council sounds like a pretty big deal. So give us a peek behind the curtain. What happens in these committees?
Yeah. So that one's probably the best for me to be able to answer, just because of the fact that I was chairman and not only chairman title part of it, but being able to also associate myself and the council with all the other Avixa groups. So that was important to them as well, because they always need to understand what's going on with the manufacturing side. So if you're a manufacturer and you come together with 30, 40, 50, maybe that was about our population essentially, of manufacturers that are struggling for various things. Most of it was the IC chips and things of that nature, and trying to get your goods in from outside of the United States into the United States. So you would think that if you have a specific thing, you're in the sound business, you're in the video business, and it's not an environment where you're looking to be competitive with each other and try to one step up each other. Instead, you're trying to help your colleagues that are in the within the Avixa community, as well as all the way to the end user.
Yeah.
So there's end user councils, there's education councils, there's women in AV councils, and all those different councils work together. So I think the original question earlier was, why do you want to give back? I want to give back because I was privy to have, those people that helped me early on.
Yeah.
And we're also trying to recruit more talent to the audiovisual business as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole topic that we should probably jump into as well. But I did want to kind of talk about, like here you are, you join these councils, right, and these committees, because people spend thousands of dollars on, consultants to come in and help them and answer questions for them. Yet here are these councils that you could join, obviously, give your time and effort to, but in return, you're going to get invaluable, information and consulting and advice, and realize that this really is, as competitive as all the companies are, it's really still a community.
Yeah, absolutely. I call it a family-like community, and that's one of the best things. And once you're in this particular, call it a VIXA community, that's a better way to say it, because
Right.
It's not just AV. There's many other things that are tied into it that are they participate in VIXA, but they're not necessarily identified as an audiovisual manufacturer, SI, or whatever it may be.
Right.
So the element of having that community, as you called it, and I agree with it, as a community, is not just to give back your knowledge or things of that nature, but you establish almost like a reunion, especially at the bigger events like InfoComm and ISE and NAB and different places like this that are very large shows. There's many more than that, but those ones really stand out, at least in the past couple of years. And to your point before, just that community, you rely upon those relationships and those connections that you have. Mm-hmm. And whether you stay with a company from high school all the way till retirement or anywhere in between, as long as you have those relationships, people are always looking to help you and even to help train you, even if it's a new element within that AV industry.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I talk to people a lot about this industry and the relationships that people build, and the mentorship that happens, and the willingness of people to give back and help others and so forth like that. You mentioned yourself that you had a couple of mentors that got you involved. What do you think AVIXA should be doing? Do you feel like I think the answer is no, and I think everybody says no, and not in an insulting way, because I think everyone just wants to do more. But are we doing enough, to bring people into this industry, to raise the awareness, and especially, when it comes to, diversity and so forth like that? Like, what are your thoughts on as far as getting people into this industry and what AVIXA is doing?
So that's a good question too, and it's kind of is a moving target, I think, for AVIXA, to be fair. So there's lots of different ways of looking at it. Diversification, whether it's from an age standpoint, maybe just out of college, still in high school, to even some points where they'll go to a grade school type of an event to try to let them understand what is AVE and what does it mean. And it doesn't have to be at a younger age, but ultimately that is definitely something that's important, because as much as I said that I've had mentors and there's different people and relationships, but there's so many of them that have retired.
Right.
So there's so there has to be some kind of a backfill. Yeah. And in order to do that, it takes a long time to be able to get people into an industry, learn the industry, and build those relationships, as you said before. What could AVIXA do more? I know that they have a lot of outreach programs.
Sure.
But I think what the executive side of it, the CEO and the executive team is really trying to do is bond with some of the other verticals that are the other sides of the business. Maybe it's the broadcast market. We saw a lot of press about there'll be a lot more broadcasts that would be there.
Right.
And consolidate a little bit more. So if people are coming to, I'll use it broadcast as an example. If somebody's going to NAB, which is prior to InfoComm every year, they probably would not be coming to InfoComm if they've captured everything that they wanted. And then the flip side of it is somebody that is more in broadcast can now go to InfoComm to still get the broadcast side of the business as well. Sure. So there's there's elements of this that are happening.
Yeah.
And then just to look at the scale of InfoComms in general. So InfoComm USA has always been popular, but now you have InfoComms in PAC Asia, in Latin America, and just all over the world essentially. So it is growing, and it's also, as I mentioned, the word diversification, because those maybe in some of those areas they just weren't as represented by a large enough entity like AVIXA in the past.
Right.
So I think that is luring the attendees and also the membership at the same time.
Yeah. Look, like I said, I think a lot's going on. There are a lot of efforts, but I think everybody realizes it's still not enough. Like we still need to do more, need to do better. And
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
I don't think that we'll ever be like, oh yeah, no, we're perfect, right? So it's one of those questions that I think the answer is always no. Let's talk about your career. How'd you get into the AV space?
So I mentioned this was out of undergraduate, living in California, undergraduate studies, excuse me. So after graduating out of a university called San Diego State University, I bumped into
the Aztecs, right? The Aztecs.
The Aztecs, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Marshall.
Yeah, they were a good team at the time.
Yeah.
So I'll mention their names because they are heroes and they're very close friends, dear friends of mine. So Randy Pagnon and Jay Regina, working for a company called Hoffman Video back then, and we would call that Hoffman Media.
Yeah.
They brought me into the business. People like Alan Braun and many others that were mentors, people that are still in the business. Some are retired and still doing different types of consulting. So that was my start. That company eventually was purchased by Anderson AV, which was then purchased by ABSPL, which ABSPL just was sold yesterday or the day before. So
big deal. Yeah.
It is absolutely.
Yeah.
So from there, started to go into the manufacturer side of the business, and worked with. Trying to think this through. I've got a long history of different companies. Some are very big and some are very small.
Right.
But ultimately, where I probably am most known for is Electrograph Systems.
Right.
Electrograph Systems was a company when I started in the business was just a little over 50 million. So they're about 7 years or so. We got up to 575 million.
Yeah.
And the interesting part of that over a course of 7 to 8 years is the average selling price was dropping about 30 to 40%. But we had relationships with all the major manufacturers, and we were basically able to provide to the system integration channel. We did not sell direct at that point, at least when under my leadership.
Right.
There was no selling direct. So there was only a channel process there. And it was very helpful to the smaller integrators because of things like lines of credit and just support and things of that nature. Yeah. So from there, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, like, I remember as a dealer myself ordering, as flat panels came out, right? The plasma TVs, and I remember selling the first 40-inch Fujitsu for like 15 grand, right? it was great.
Exactly. And then that was $15,999 for a 42-inch, and they had 480.
Yeah, and then a couple of years later, they're like $1,500, right? But anyway, so but Electrograph was like the place to go. But you, like, let's talk about your career. Like you didn't just start off as a VP of sales, right? Like how did you grow in your career to get into those type of leadership roles? Like what did you have to do to kind of differentiate yourself and elevate your career and your status versus what others were doing?
So there was a company which is still in business. Actually, I helped them to launch at an InfoComm called Optima today. It's Opto CTX or something like that. Yeah. So I decided this thing called Optimize Your Viewing, and we used it to relaunch the brand name. So when I was there, I think I was a director of sales there. So from that standpoint, one of my customers was Electrograph.
Okay.
And I don't, of course, this is going out, but kudos to Sam Taylor. Sam Taylor drove me around the state of Maryland a little bit, saying, "How about you come move here and get involved with Electrograph?" So I didn't just start day one as the vice president.
Right.
The idea behind it was to get, to learn the business. And I was doing a region with the Mid-Atlantic states, and it just exploded. Just exploded in a good way. Yeah. Excuse me for those words, but it just grew really fast.
Right.
And then unfortunately, there was no such thing as the vice president of sales. There was no role as a vice president of sales. There was a national sales manager. And unfortunately, that gentleman passed away. So as a result of that, someone had to step into the role. And that's what I did. I was elevated to the vice president. I was also part owner at the company.
Gotcha.
And we had a team of 125 people.
Wow.
Most of which were CTS certified. So that was our That was one of our specializations. Is back then it was called InfoComm. So we put everybody through CTS that was capable or wanting to do it.
And that
so
was
that's kind of how they evolved. Yeah.
and that was at Electrograph that you had everyone CTS certified?
Not everybody, but we had a lot. Most everybody that was customer facing, being regional managers in the field, we wanted them to have CTS certification.
Why was that important for you guys?
For us, well, first it was a first. It was done for a distributor. That's number one.
Right.
But number two is that it gave credibility to everybody else that was out there that had a CTS. So it's kind of, I'll make maybe a crazy analogy, but it would be like a PhD speaking to a doctor speaking to another doctor, or something along those lines. Even though CTS is not renowned as a postgraduate certification, but it does hold a lot of integrity.
Look, in our industry, I think it is the PhD, right? Like, I think having a CTS is even more important than a bachelor's, right? And I feel
I mean, you're right, because the education, you could have done something totally unrelated, which is what I did too. Right. I was in business.
Yeah.
An MBA in business, right? But the element of the CTS, it gives a feeling of at least this person understands the business and understands a lot of the capability of doing integrated projects.
Yeah. I was just wondering, like, why? Because at Electrograph it was mostly displays, right? Like you guys weren't doing like the full system or any of the.
No, but over time. So we started out as displays actually at the time. Well, before me, it was all based off of a 1024 by 768 graphics card that cost $100,000. It was started that way. I wasn't there then. Before my time. So, but that wasn't the idea. We, over time, because we were the integration market, the system integrators needed an outlet to be able to buy everything. Mm-hmm. So we did our best to supplement anything from sound to the brackets to just about everything that could go in. Back then, a system, a boardroom consisted of so many components. Today, today it's cloud-based, let's say, all right? So we were just look at and talk, communicate with the market. We didn't go to the end users at that point. Maybe some of the consultants would come to us and they say that we need this, we need that, we need certain types of things that are going to go into the traditional pro AV side and eventually into the CEDIA market that you were a customer of. Right. Actually, your company that you had was in that market. Right. And there wasn't really an outlet for you to get the consumer-based products back then that we were selling. Yeah. No, but it was just interesting for me that even back then you're pushing InfoComm and CTS and you understood the power behind the organization and having that. Look, I think having a CTS is probably the most important thing for a professional in our industry to have. I fill a lot of roles that require CTS, very few roles require like MBAs, right? So it's really important, I think. So cool. So you had a great run at Electrograph, and then you worked for a display manufacturer, right? Or you owned one for a while. So what happened there is I pivoted to a company that was a video wall company. So what that was, they were plasma displays with no bezels. So the company is called Sawatech. My role was president CEO of the company, based out of Chicago area. It was Northbrook, Illinois. We had kind of a lock on the market because you couldn't get a product like this. Mm-hmm. Broadcast market in particular was very big for us. It was great in-camera performance. I think I did that about 7-8 years as well. And what happened there is the company was not sustainable long term. And the reason for that was that our OEM supplier, or ODM supplier, LG out of Seoul, Korea, came to us and said, well, we got only 1 year left to continue to build the product for you. So I went from Orion at a 42-inch, and I had them build for me a 42-inch and a 60-inch. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, there were no more plasma companies. Panasonic, Samsung, and the last one was LG.
Everyone got out, right?
So as a result, went to China, started sourcing some direct-view LED. And one of them was, I called it Laird, but Liard.
Hmm.
And Eliard was in the process of purchasing Planar. So I went from Solitech to Planar.
Yeah.
I probably won't go through every step because there were a lot of them.
Right.
But I stay in the business of display for the most part, whether it's the hardware itself, meaning the displays, or the video processing and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Why? It's because and projectors and things of that nature. But that's been my skill set from the very beginning is video and the
Hmm.
processing. And most projects need some kind of a display.
Right.
So it's, in some other cases where if I might have gone another direction, it might have been something that the whole entire segment just dissolved for whatever reason.
Sure. So look, you've worked for some of the big ones, right? Like you mentioned, Planar and Panasonic, and then you've also worked for some upstarts like MediaStar, and now you're with Neoti and Prism. I think you were there for for the rise of Prism, right? Like when it launched and so forth. So let's talk about like the differences of when you walk into established organizations versus having to really get in there at the ground level.
Yes. So what I look at, and there's positives and negatives. So the larger companies, you mentioned some of them, and the issue there is especially coming in as leadership. So when you come in as leadership and someone's been there for 5, 10, 20, 30 years sometimes, right, just before they're ready to retire,
Right.
they do not want change.
No.
And that is a big issue with the large companies. The positive issue is they have brand equity.
Right.
So to some extent, you're going to still have revenue coming in because the customer base is loyal to the brand, and they're also to some extent to those same employees that have been there for a long period of time.
Yeah.
But there's other the other challenges of the large companies as well is they tend to make massive changes. So I'll just not mention the names, but two of the major companies starts with P.
Right.
There's a lot of them there that start with P. But anyway, the point is that oftentimes the management decisions are made overseas,
Right.
and it's not typically just North America that has it. It's just globally. Globally, we're going to make a change, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. So that's the pivot that they're doing. They're looking at their P&L and they decide, okay, well, we better get new people in.
Right.
So the problem with that is your tenure within the company, whether it's short or long, doesn't matter too much. It's about what do the books look like, essentially.
Yeah, and any economic downturn, can impact really good people, and we see it all the time, unfortunately. You talk about like the leadership not wanting to change, and I think in general, change is hard, right? People tend not to want to change, and sometimes, sometimes it's easier to change the people than have the people change, right? For the new leadership. When it comes to leadership and being a change agent, like what's your philosophy on that? Like, what's your strategy? You come into an organization, Vince, we need you to come in here and improve sales and change the way we're doing stuff. How do you approach that, especially with the current staff?
Yeah, so I think in that regard, the size doesn't matter as much as it does the people that you're working with. So the first thing is to try to evaluate in short term, evaluate where are the strengths, where are the challenges, where are the weaknesses of how we're going to be able to execute on the plan. So when you come in leadership, there's typically a plan that you've committed to with the higher leadership that oftentimes was the board of directors for me. Mm-hmm. But it could be the CEO or it could be a vice president, whoever that may be, that you've now sat down and said, okay, this is my person who I report to. So the first thing to do is look at, as I mentioned before, where is where are the touch points that need immediate action, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I like to say, first off, I'm going to look to see if there's silos and eliminate silos from day one if possible, or day 5, whatever it is. So by doing that, you can't just come in and say, hey, I know everything and this is how it has to be done. You have to get reciprocal accountability with the management of that particular department and say, well, let's go through how is it if I'm on the sales side, the operations side, whatever it is, what is it that we can do to come together so that everybody's on the same page, internally and externally. So when you do that and you get the buy-in, I'll call it, so that there's mutual accountability. I use that word a lot. At that point, it's not just you trying to make a change. It's the leadership team as a whole to not only them want to do it, them also you're kind of now enlisting them to help say, this is what we want to do as a team, a leadership team.
Right.
And then from there, get the buy-in from their teams as well. And that's oftentimes there is conflict and conflict between departments.
Sure.
It may not be said, but the process definitely slows down as a result of it.
Yeah, there's always going to be friction, right?
Yep.
When people come in and try to enact change, and people are like, well, this is the way we've always done it, which is one of my pet peeves, right? If whenever I hear that, it always my skin crawls. But you've had those obviously you've had those situations. What do you do when you hit those friction points? First of all, with your team, say you have a rock star, your top producer, but he's like, I've been doing great. I'm not the one that has to change. How do you get those people to buy in?
Yeah, well, those are the hardest ones to get in your camp, right? But at the same token, what typically happens is, as long as there's enough percentage of whatever the team is, the department, the entire company, whatever it is, you probably don't want to push that person too far, too fast. Mm-hmm. Rather let that individual or individuals, plural, see if this particular plan is working.
Right.
And when that person sees it's working, they're probably going to, I would say, jump on the
bandwagon.
The bandwagon,
right?
To some extent. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but if they see that value, someone sees value and was skeptical in the beginning, oftentimes they'll join in. Yeah. And not only will they join in, but then they start to share their experience and how they've done well and success stories.
Right.
And that's how you get a homogenous kind of voice that everyone's rowing in the same boat. Isn't that the idea?
Yeah. I like to use sports analogies, but I kind of feel like it's like the star player, the new coach comes in, a star player, little arm's length and standoffish, and then a team starts winning, and then all of a sudden the star player is best friends with the coach, right? So it's sometimes, the winning fixes things, but any business philosophies or truisms that you live by, and anything that you're just like, this is my mantra?
Yeah. So from my mantra, I think you have to be, no matter who it is, whether it's your staff, whether it's your customer base, whether it's consultants, whoever it is in the business, you have to be the truism word that you use. You have to be true to your words, and you have to follow through. So anyone could say you're the greatest salesperson, the greatest operations person, the greatest company, or whatever it is. But if you don't prove that, it's just words.
Right.
So that's part one, is making sure the words that you say, and just making sure that you're going to make mistakes. I'd rather jump fast and let somebody know that I made a mistake, even though it may be embarrassing or whatever it may be.
Sure. Just
do it right up front. And some people say, well, that's just too much information. You want to keep a relationship? That's typically what you're going to do.
Yeah. It's amazing how, it's amazing how honesty and transparency leads to credibility, right?
Absolutely. I agree with it. And in some cases it's a little bit, maybe makes someone nervous to admit something that went wrong. That's all.
Right.
The other element is, in the business that I've done over the years, pretty much no matter what the title is, I've been forward facing to sales, marketing, things of that nature, and operations. So if I use those three examples, if the customer or whoever it is, maybe it's not a customer yet, or it's a colleague, or it's a partnering company, if somebody's reaching out and has a question, you need to be able to get back to them quickly. Mm-hmm. And that's very important to people. So even if you survey, we've been communicating a lot with the consultants. They say 24 hours or less.
Right.
That's not just a callback, but that's whatever their request is. So I used to have, that was one of the things that was pretty powerful for us at Electrograph, 125 salespeople. the requirement that I had set out was no longer than 20 minutes. If somebody leaves a message, because back then it was not so easy to do everything we can do today.
Yeah.
But if they left a voicemail and they said that they were calling in, this is Sally, I'm calling for this reason, 20 minutes, somebody from each of the teams, because they could all get to that in term back then called the voicemail.
Right. The general mailbox.
They would have to get back to that person. And if that person made a mistake and they misdialed or the wrong company, well, we're going to tell them that.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10 or more, it was something that a customer needed a response fast.
Right. It's funny. I had Nick Biglaris on a couple of weeks back, and he talked about the same thing, that, when I asked him, like, what sets him apart than everyone else, and he's like, responsiveness. He's like, I just get back to people right away. Even if it's like, hey, I got your email, let me get the answer, but I'll get back to you. He at least gets back to people right away. And he's like, that's what really led to his sales success. So yeah, responsiveness, transparency, honesty, credibility, trustworthy, it seems to be the core principles of being a successful salesperson.
Yeah, and it's not just sales, and I know Nick well. He's a good guy, and he's speaking, and those are truthful words because I've worked with him before.
Yeah,
I know. But the element of it's not just sales though, because in theory, you asked me about business as a whole. Everybody, including the person at the desk, welcomes somebody into the door. Everybody's selling on behalf of the company. It's a little bit more difficult to say that the accounting department is or whatever it is.
Right.
But at the end of the day,
anyone customer facing,
everybody's working together to sell. If that's what your business is and you need revenue, that's how you're going to get your revenue, is being that way to the public. But most importantly to the customers, they always can trust you.
I'll tell you one thing that we did when we ran our integration company that I don't know a lot of other companies do, and that we took our technicians and put them through basic sales training. Not because we want them to upsell or sell. We were just trying to teach them how to communicate, how to act in front of a client, how to say the right things, know what not to say, what to say, and it made a big difference because in our eyes, we sales guys are sales guys. You sell, but the technicians are the ones that actually follow through, right? And they are the ones that end up being the face of the company and the last people that the clients actually, touch and have in their homes and so forth. So really agree on that part. When you look back, obviously a lot of success, but no career is perfect. Any lessons learned, anything that you'd want to share with somebody else that maybe can learn from you?
Yeah, I think from my years, we can call it success, but there's also, I would say some bumps along the road.
Mm-hmm.
And going to, and I don't know, some of these companies are still in business,
Sure.
But there's a lot of problems that happen with the funding of companies. And what I mean by funding, not every company is just can continue on just by the revenue that they have. So they're typically going out to venture capital, PE, whatever it may be. And oftentimes you're brought in because you've been recruited, maybe through Bird Dog or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, that there is a financial issue. And when the financial issue happens, there's going to be very few people that are there. Right. One company, it was 97 people in one day globally were let go. Mm-hmm. I was one of those people.
Right.
CEO told me before I told anyone else and apologized.
Yeah.
It was purely a money issue. A deal fell through for funding. So it's not something, in other words, as great as the company is, it's not as though you have to go doing due diligence in regards to seeing their books, but just feel that it's not just because it's a big name or even a small name and it's been very successful. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they're funded well enough. Right. So that's something that me or whoever it is that was looking at a company, not just on a track record, but where's the real funding coming from? Is it coming from profitability only? Right. Or is it coming from outside sources? So I say that as though it has happened to me, right? In regards to my career path, but it's happening more and more in the business. Sure. The consolidation of companies and also of SIs and things of that nature that are not just AV, but in other areas of the market, other markets as well.
Right. Well, look, I think that's part of the evolution of our industry is, as we talked earlier, there's not a lot of MBAs, right? There's not a lot of Harvard grad and Wharton grads, and so these people are running, big successful companies, and they might not have the best structure in place. With and it's not just profit. Sometimes it's just cash flow, right? You could be profitable and have bad cash flow and still go under, right? So there's a lot of different aspects that I think that our industry is evolving through, learning through, growing up a little bit, and the consolidation is part of it, which is all part of the whole thing. For people coming into this space or already in the industry, but they want to grow, they want to continue to advance their careers and climb that proverbial ladder. What advice do you have for them? How do people get ahead?
I think they have to stand out in whatever role they start at. They need to stand out, but not only to stand out in that initial role, be able to be cross-functional, meaning if I keep using the same ones, maybe it's sales and marketing because they're kind of well aligned, right?
Sure.
So if somebody's doing sales and they're doing well in that sales role and they're really, they're working with the marketing department, they're learning what marketing's doing too. Mm-hmm. Why is that important? Because when I look to my next role, if it's not sales, it might be operations or it may be something else. And it could be in operations, it could be R&D.
Yeah.
But if you know more about an organization and you're trying to stay within AV, which let's say for a manufacturer to manufacturer, or you're with an SI to an SI, that's going to be very valuable in regards to maybe your next step. So that's part one. I think that's part one. And then the other thing is to be able to be collaborative, whether you're mentoring or just being collaborative. It's very important to be able to discuss that in your next step. So if you're looking to a role that may be more, it's at a higher level, let's just call that, maybe from a title standpoint and also from a financial standpoint.
Right.
So those types of things are really important. And also try to keep in mind some of your biggest successes. Mm-hmm. That's also very helpful, I think, if you are looking to advance. It could be in the same company at the same time.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's the best thing to do, is to elevate yourself within that company. And then potentially a recruiter comes by and maybe finds something outside of it.
Right. Well, no, for sure about that. But I think tracking your successes and also tracking your lessons learned. But the first thing you said, I think, is really interesting, because somebody else mentioned this to me once, and I really liked it. There's just saying that it's not just a ladder; it can be a lattice. Where you can move sideways as well. Like everyone thinks that there's only one path, but sometimes you get it. You're technical, but you have a great outgoing personality, and you want to get into sales, or other way around. You're a salesperson, but you're really technical. Maybe you want to go into engineering. So it's not just hey, I got to climb the step by step, but maybe I move over to the side and then go up that way. And you're right. By collaborating and being part of different projects and networking, I agree. I think that's a good way of getting ahead. What about soft skills? Like what traits, what makes people promotable or indispensable, for your teams?
I think we've kind of touched on this a lot. Relationships that are internal and external. So I call it a soft. I think that's a soft trait, meaning you should be likable. You should be, respected within the organization that you're there, because you may be in a non-for-profit, because it's not always about profits, right?
Right.
And also the customer base, or the customer addressable market, right? It's, to me, that's kind of a really important thing, is being not known by everybody, but the people you engage with would say, that's a good person, that's a good person, they've done right by me in terms of from a business standpoint. And not only that, but I could be a reference for them or referral to another customer that they're talking to.
Right.
So that's kind of a soft trait that turns into a great business skill.
Great.
And then other than that, though, I don't know of something off the top of my head. In terms of a soft skill. Yeah.
Well, Vince, I think we've covered a lot, right? It's we definitely reviewed a lot of what's going on, and if anyone wants to follow up with you, how do they get a hold of you?
You can go to my LinkedIn as one place. So if you just put Vince Schuster, VinceSchuster, and probably with the exception of this little dot on my head, I should look similar. In regards to on LinkedIn, there's a lot of people that have connected with me over the years, and that's a great place for you to potentially expand your own network, whether it's myself or with Leo, because we probably know lots of people.
Right.
Secondarily, if you'd like to reach out to me from my business email address, it's going to be Vince.Schuster at Neoti, so Neoti.com. So you're welcome to reach out to me there. And even on LinkedIn, it probably shows another email address for me. I'm probably giving you too much information, but it's just my first, my last name at gmail.com.
Right. Well, look, Vince, I appreciate you joining this week. I hope the listeners gained, from your valuable insights. And speaking of the listeners, if you're still here and listening, please hit the like, subscribe. 5-star review would be appreciated. And until next week, good luck on your hunts.
Thank you very much for inviting me along, and I've enjoyed the time with you, Leo.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure to talk to you and work with you.
Awesome.